all the new businesses that are coming up now, I can't think of any new business coming up now that would not be AI first. Like, it's amazing what you can do with AI as an entrepreneur starting a new company. It's crazy, all this stuff. They go on for days talking about all the tools that we use. So I think startups and early adopters are going to drive the ones that decide not to. I mean, I guess that's my opinion anyway, based on what I'm saying.
Hi, my name is Dimitri Panici, and I'm a content creator, agency owner, and AI enthusiast. You're listening to the AI Agents Podcast, brought to you by JotForm, and featuring our very own CEO and founder, Ida Tank. This is the show where artificial intelligence meets innovation, productivity, and the tools shaping the future of work. Enjoy the show. Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the AI Agents Podcast. In this episode, we have Chris Faulkner, the co-founder of Agent Blueprint. How you doing, Chris?
Good, Dimitri. Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. We're really excited to chat with you. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on in the world of AI and AI agents, and we're always excited to get somebody new on the show to chat about their product. So please, without further ado, tell us a little bit about the AI landscape from your perspective. How'd you get into it, first and foremost? And not only how'd you get into AI, but how'd you get started with Agent Blueprint?
Yeah, so getting into AI goes kind of back to my early career. I got out of the Air Force as an aircraft mechanic and got off the Air Force in college, and then right out of college became a web developer. So worked with like ASP.NET, C#, that kind of stuff, like a front end developer. So I was in tech pretty early. And then I found myself at ServiceNow, which is one of the biggest cloud SaaS platforms out there. It's a workflow platform. And it turned out to be a pretty good decision because it was pre-IPO. So, now they're the rocket ship that went off. So it actually worked out professionally and, financially. Like, can't retire yet, but, it was a pretty good, pretty good deal. So I was at ServiceNow for 10 years. And during that time, because I joined pre-IPO, like I said, so they're kind of like still in that startup mentality, but they had like Frank Slootman on the CEO. So they were really going into this crazy growth stage. And I was a technical consultant doing a lot of development type work. And then they sent out this email. I remember I was at our sales kickoff, and it was asking if anyone wanted to move to Australia to help grow the market, because they're expanding out into, Asia and APAC. So it's like, I had no mouths to feed. I was, wasn't married or anything. And so I raised my hand and they let me go. And so I basically I sold everything I owned except for two luggage bags, and they moved to Sydney, Australia. Amazing experience, and honestly, if anyone ever gets the opportunity to travel abroad on somebody else's dime, it gives you perspective, and it's just a really good experience. But so yeah, I was in Australia for a little while, which was it's a lot of fun. Got to go, travel around Australia, go to New Zealand and all that kind of stuff. Funny thing is when I got to the office there, I was a technical guy, right? So the sales guys were in the office. It was a little Regis office where the Sydney Opera House is. And they had a new building over demos and stuff like that. So I started doing demos with them in front of customers. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I love this. Instead of building big things at a customer, go and do a demo and like kind of the fun stuff. So anyway, I kind of knew I wanted to go that direction. Then they asked me to move to Singapore because they were going out to Southeast Asia. And I'm like, why not at this point? I might as well just go, see everything. So moved to Singapore. And that's when really things really started kicking off. That's where I met our co-founder, Amy Glencross. She was working at Deloitte at the time, and we were on this really big project in Singapore together. So I spent 5 years there, and eventually I did cross to the dark side and go into pre-sales from being technical. During that time, that 5 years, a lot of traveling, a lot of going to Southeast Asia and working with different customers. But that's when the whole machine learning thing started gaining traction. So ServiceNow has always adopted AI early. Like, they've been a very big, and it makes sense because they've got this big database that spans across the entire businesses that of their customers. So they get all this data, like all the ticketing data, they've got employee data, they've got just all kinds of stuff. So it makes a lot of sense for AI. So essentially what would happen is, say you submit a ticket to, reset password or whatever it might be, with IT ticket in the ServiceNow, that's what it does. Like, ticketing systems, bread and butter. It would automatically kind of put it into a category based on the machine learning it did and all their data. And I thought that was interesting. So I've always had this big, this really fascinated with the way AI can really streamline things. So yeah, did that for a while and then came back to the US, went to Stripe after my 10-year, basically right on the day. I went to Stripe, the payments company. Yeah, and right, that timing there was pretty good because that's right when like ChatGPT started coming out. So this is a few years ago. And Stripe's a very forward leaning company, a very product led company, where ServiceNow is a very sales led company. You go to Stripe and it's made by engineers for engineers from the ground up, and they had just started building out their sales team kind of later on in their uh, tenure. And so I came in as a pre-sales consultant with them as well. But they really had embraced AI. I really respected the fact that they had their own LLMs set up for the internal, like on their own, infrastructure, like right when they would come out. So it was just really cool. And the Collison brothers, they're the Irish guys that came here to the US and they built Stripe. There's the brothers that founded it. Um, they're like, they're there and they're with Sam Altman and all that. So they've kind of I've always been in that, through the Silicon Valley, one of those companies. So I was around it a lot. And then, but at the same time, after I was at Stripe for a couple of years, I kind of got burned out of the corporate American kind of thing. I just needed a break. And I think you see a lot of people, I was like right at 40, so a lot of people kind of go through that. If you have the luxury of being able to take some time off to take a sabbatical, like that's what I did. It was like, okay, I need a break. But I was still, super passionate about technology and AI. So during that sabbatical, which you're supposed to just kind of take a break and not do anything work related, I just found myself deep in entrepreneur, stuff and AI. I was just like, that was all I was doing in my spare time. I found myself. So it was like, I naturally said, it was like 2 or 3 months later, I was like, I do know I want to definitely dive into this AI to the world of AI. I also want to start a business. So I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to, give this a shot. Um, all the best things in life that happened to me was from taking risks. So this is the risk I decided to take. At that time, it was just me, and I worked with a couple of other guys that were starting a company out of Europe. So I did that for a little bit with those guys. And then I started coming back into the ServiceNow world. And that's when Amy, she's the one I was telling you, my co-founder, we were great friends in Singapore. We worked together in Singapore. And the thing about being in Singapore is you go there and it's a bunch of expats. Like half the country is expats. People from Europe, from Asia, India, US, everywhere. So we became, friends, like me and Amy and a couple of our other friends who work together, is because everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's away from their home. Everybody's like in this, it's Singapore, this little island in Asia. So you become really close friends, and we traveled all over the place, Thailand and Vietnam and all that together. A lot of fun. Everybody kind of went their several ways eventually, but yeah, a few years later, I'm on a sabbatical, like I was saying, and just as it turns out, Amy did the same thing. She worked at Deloitte for I think 15 years plus. She was in the whole consulting business process side of things, and so I randomly reached out to her, and we're both like, let's start something. Let's start a ServiceNow advisory consulting company. So that's what we started, Nalgentic. Didn't really have. We knew we wanted to be AI focused, but what we needed to do is really talk to customers. And that's what we started doing, talking to customers, talking to clients, going to these events like ServiceNow's Knowledge. They call it Knowledge. It's like Salesforce's Dreamforce, where you get a bunch of people together. And we started talking to them, and they're, the same problems kept coming up over and over again. It was like agentic AI, agent this, agent that. ServiceNow totally bought into the whole AI agent thing. And like, they just completely went 100% full in. As we all know, this stuff doesn't quite work as advertised a lot of times, especially the early days of the agent stuff. So, so we found out that ROI was the big thing. They didn't know what the ROI was they were getting out of it. They didn't know where to start. They didn't have the resources. So, and it was like all this hype going on. So they were just confused. So we saw, okay, here's a big problem. Let's go in and advise them on how to set up because Amy and I both know exactly what it's like working with customers, the processes and things like that with businesses. So yeah, so we decided to start that. And then, so that was Nalgenic. And then we decided to productize our services, so we started building out how to automate, like how you do advisory and help AI stuff. And that's how Agent Blueprint came along. We started building it for ourselves. And then we saw that there's probably a big market out there for this. So we separated Nalgenic, and then we got Agent Blueprint, and that's our IP. And so it's its own entity, its own business. So that's where I know it's a super long-winded way of the story there, but Yeah.
No, it's a good starting. It's a really good starting point. I appreciate it. I always like to hear how people get into it, and hearing the that part of the conversation I think is going to be valuable to a lot of people getting into it. And it's so funny how your sabbatical, which was supposed to be away from work, kind of got you back into it in maybe a more in a better way, right? Because some of us, like you said, will get burnt out from that corporate reality at some point, and the sabbatical is good to rest, and also you do some of your best thinking when you don't have that same level of day to day, like, I don't want to say responsibility, but like, workload going on where your mind's always covered with a million different projects that you have going on. So I think that's really cool.
Yep. Yeah. And wherever you find yourself, you clear your head a little bit, and wherever you find yourself, just, going towards, that's the thing that you're passionate about, because if you're passionate about it, which I just happen to be super passionate about AI stuff, it's like, it's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel like work. It's not sucking the life out of you. You really enjoy it, and you almost have to stop yourself and make sure you take care of other things in life, because it's so, it's just a lot of fun to work with. So that's when you find that, that's a good sign of something maybe to go pursue.
Yeah, very true. And so obviously, like you said, you're starting to productize what you were doing with Nalgentic, and I think a lot of people are pretty interested in hearing about new tools that are coming out. So tell everyone here a little bit more about Agent Blueprint, and who you're trying to reach here, and how you're trying, and how practically you're trying to help.
Yeah, yeah. So like I said, Agent Blueprint came out from trying to automate and productize our advisory AI services. I almost try to automate myself out of a job. It's kind of how I looked at it. It was like, we're going to be AI first. Like, so we didn't want to do typical pricing by head, by hours. That's typically how consulting companies grow. They start hiring more people, and that's how they scale, and that's how they grow in value. Definitely didn't want to do that. So we knew there's this new way of consulting that's coming up. No one really knows it yet, but the old way is that's kind of good. That's kind of going away in the past. The whole, like, hiring a bunch of people, going in and doing like a 6-month engagement where you're getting paid for knowledge workers to go in and make slide decks and stuff like that. And I don't mean to, like, demean their job and everything. It's very useful in a lot of ways, but you can see what's coming, right? So we wanted to be on top of that. We wanted to kind of be part of this new consulting agency, whatever that looks like. AI first is what we knew. And so that's kind of how Agent Blueprint came by. It was like, we productized what we were doing at Nalgentic, which was agentic AI, but it was ServiceNow based. Agent Blueprint.ai is vendor agnostic. So because I mean, there's so many platforms, and most companies, like, maybe they'll use one, but they use multiple ones, and it's and everything's changing constantly. So that's why we kind of wanted to go vendor agnostic there.
And what specifically have you found? Because when did you guys launch? Just for the audience to know.
Oh yeah, just last week we sort of did a quiet launch. So right now we're doing a design partner where we're working with clients and other partners, other boutique consulting firms that do a lot of technical work, but they don't have the capacity to go in and, like, analyze the business requirements. Um, so we're working with them as well. So we're finding our way into product market fit, and we've got it. So we've got a big network, and a lot of potential clients that want to work with it. So now it's a matter of going in there, and really it's interesting, because it's not like the old stuff where you build this SaaS platform or this deterministic workflow application, and you kind of have this thing it's going to do. With the agentic stuff, it's all new, and it's also undeterministic. So it's like, it's just the whole nature of it is very fluid and unknown, which is exciting. But at the same time, there's no book on this stuff. There's no book on setting up an agentic company, and how to approach an agentic project. And if you try to approach it with the old way of doing things, you're going to find yourself, in hole pretty fast. But no, the big thing with Agent Blueprint, we found out, is like, what a lot of people are doing with agents. And, there's a lot of companies that aren't really succeeding. You get all these studies coming out, like, showing, you know, like that latest MIT one, I was like 95% of companies aren't, seeing the ROI, which that study is pretty flawed in a lot of ways. But there is a lot of truth to it as well. There is a lot of companies that aren't seeing it. They're just going out, experimenting, doing these POCs, and they're not actually making it out to production. They go into this, what do they call it? POC purgatory, or whatever they call it, where it's like, it just forever is an experiment. And what we found is a lot of people aren't looking at it from the business perspective first. Like, what are your business initiatives? What business outcomes are you trying to achieve? Like, that should be out front and center. Start there. Don't think about agents or workflows or anything. Start with your business. And then, like, what are your business like? What are the things you're trying to accomplish? And why can't you accomplish those? So you narrow down the challenges and the bottlenecks. And then you start looking at use cases. Like, what are use cases in your company where you could improve your whatever it is, if it's your revenue or if you're trying to improve your efficiency or lower costs, whatever it might be, all kinds of things your business could be focusing on. Start with that, start with that and then prioritize those use cases, find the low hanging fruit, and then start applying, okay, how can we use technology in to solve this? And a lot of times when it can't be deterministic, because if it can be deterministic, if you can do an if then else, always do that, like always go that way. Don't go agents just because you want to do agents. Like, because that's where if you got something that works 99.9% of the time, like a reset password integration to Active Directory, like that always resets the password. You don't want an agent going into your company's, password database and doing stuff themselves. The agent would use the tool to do that, right? So it's like, but always try to do deterministic first. But with that being said, there's a lot of processes where if it requires context-aware decision-making and some creativity, that's where the, agents come in. And then they can use those tools to do things like that. But starting small is the most important thing to do. And you got to keep it small, and one of the reasons why we're addressing mid-market, like we want to go after mid-market, like that's our ideal customer, because enterprises get stuck in this bureaucratic, political, drawn-out, long processes. They want to put out RFPs and take months before you make a decision. That's a hard thing to do in this landscape of AI where everything's changing. So, yeah, that's kind of where we really put a focus on is understanding what's the business value that you get out of it first, and then coming up with a plan on how you're going to do it, like starting like with one agent, that kind of thing, and then outlining what that looks like from architecture perspective, like what is the design patterns? We orchestrator, manager, agents, things like that. What platform are you going to put it on? Is it ServiceNow, Salesforce, Agentforce, N8N, Lindy? There's all these different platforms that do agent stuff, right? So like that's a whole other thing. So we bring all that together with Agent Blueprint and basically provide a blueprint. Like that was going to be our blueprint. The Agent Blueprint was our one of
Where the term came from, yeah.
deliverables. Yeah. So we decided to automate that, and that's why we called it that. Luckily, the name was out there too. Agent Blueprint was out there as a company, and so.
Yeah, absolutely. I am curious about where necessarily did you kind of, or maybe to go back for the audience a little bit, you mentioned something about deterministic workflows versus what's going on with Agentic. And I think it would be probably good just for the audience to hear that isn't quite aware of what that means, what the differences are between those two different things and how it's such a different challenge for you as a new company.
Yeah. So, you got deterministic, which is the stuff we've been working with for years. It's like if then else. It's software. It always works. The outcome's always the same. I mean, there might be anomalies where it's not, like maybe the system goes down or there's some glitch somewhere. But typically, like, if 2 + 2 = 4, every time you add 2 and 2 together, it equals 4 on the other end. That's very deterministic type things. Like I said, that password reset's a good example because everybody goes through that at their work. When you reset your password, it used to be it would create a ticket. That ticket would go to some human being, and they would go in and they would manually reset your password for you, whatever. But now it's all automated. It's a system goes in Active Directory, automatically does it. That's a deterministic. It's a tool. It's a logical tool. It's objective. Whereas when you're talking about agentic, it's a lot more subjective. It's where you're making a decision based on context. It's not a strict if then else. You hardly ever get the same exact answer twice. It's just like talking to people. Like you might have a certain perspective and you might go the same direction every time, but it's not always going to be exactly the same. So, the use cases we found with Agentic is, like, for example, the one that we built with ServiceNow, our first one was, automating the RFP process. Where you basically, a company wants to buy a new product to solve a problem, and they put out go through the tender process, and they put it out and like let all the vendors in the world say, we're the right person and we got the best price and all that stuff. The whole process of that internally with the procurement departments is very, very time consuming. But at the same time, a lot of it is just really judging whether or not product is worth going forward with, comparing it with the policy documents. And then once they start it, like it's answering vendor questions. So there's a lot of interactions with documents and text that humans do now with procurement, with that kind of thing. That's a very good candidate for an agent to come in and do, because it's kind of low risk, as long as you aren't doing the big products, the multi-million dollar kind of projects. But if you're doing the smaller things, this is a really good way to start, is that it's not going to embarrass your company if it messes up. You're not going to find yourself in a deep hole if it messes up. So it's a really good way to start these kind of use cases. But yeah, that's where you got an agent that comes in. It's a context aware decision making that it does, and it can make its own decisions on what to do next. You give it tools and what to use. Like you tell it what tools it can use. Like a lot of tools, or maybe it's a Python script, or it's using MCP to integrate to another system, whatever it might be. But yeah, that's kind of at a high level. But
No, that's a good breakdown. And do you think, two questions, do you think there will be a need still for those like automation platforms moving forward? Or do you think maybe there's even going to be a mix between the two? Because a lot of workflows I see now will end up, in order to make the automations even better, they'll implement different agentic tools like in some of the steps in order to have decision making sort of in the automation. You see this a lot with like what N8N's doing.
yeah,
Yeah, you familiar with this?
yeah, oh yeah, definitely, yeah. I started with N8N when I started building out agents, which is a great learning tool. They've come a long way now. They've actually got some good productive use cases out there that are actual customers using it in production. So yeah, N8N's awesome. Great way to learn. You don't always have to use a visual with it, by the way. You can use like JSON kind of programmatically building agents, which is what we're looking to do with Agent Blueprint, automatically create that agentic workflow in 8N. So the end-to-end coming in on your business, and then picking use case, and then setting up the agent architecture, and then actually implementing it. And so that's, and 8N's one of the companies that we're looking to do that with.
Well, yeah, because a lot of those companies, if I'm not incorrect, the blueprints that, well, not to use the term blueprint, but like what Make.com uses the term scenario blueprint. There are a bunch of modules that are like architectured in like a big JSON blueprint, right?
Yeah, it's all programmatically done. So, again, the hardest part is coming up with the right use case and the right implementation methodology, the right, phased approach, starting really small, doing evals, like evaluating your agents, making sure like the observability, there's all these things that go in with it that, if you just pick up and start building things and you don't take all those things into account, you're just going to be one of the 95% that it doesn't end up working for, because it's just you dig yourself in a hole pretty fast. It's amazing when you first start. It's like a magic, but then, reality starts hitting when these things start, giving you that AI slop or whatever you might call it. Because the more agents you put in, it's like a big circle of, when I'm in school, like big circle of kids, like they whisper to each other all the way around. And then like by the time you get to the other side of the circle, it's a completely different thing that was whispered. But, so essentially you got all these agents working together. They start hallucinating and just, it gets crazy. So you got to be structured about how you roll it out. But, with like things like N8N, back to your question about like workflow and tool, workflow and agents and things like that. I don't think workflow is ever going to go anywhere. I mean, even with humans, like what we do, we still use tools. Like if you want to put a hole in the wall, drill a hole, like you take a drill and a drill bit and use a tool to do it. You don't like try to invent, get something sharp and skinny and try to manually put a hole in the wall. It's kind of like you've got tools to use. So these agents are always going to have tools to use. So the deterministic workflow and tools, I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. I mean, if that went away, then the world's a completely different place at that time, where it's anybody's guess. So.
Yeah. Okay. And I am curious then, it kind of leads to a bit of a natural question. Where do you see that this, in the next couple of years, is going to have a consistent impact on the workplace? You mentioned previously whether it be flawed or not, the study about how people aren't seeing the ROI with agents. You're seeing that when you string a lot of these agents together without like proper guide rails, that they could go off the rails. Where are you seeing this technology kind of advance and improve in the next 5 years in order to feel a little bit more human in, I guess maybe the reliability sense, which is kind of ironic because humans aren't perfect either, but it's like where everyone's head goes. It's like, oh, I want it to work like a person. Like associates mess up all the time, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not like all these, yeah, I'm like, man, we're all these perfect people. You talk about,
Yeah, I was like, where are you getting these? Yeah, where are you getting these perfect employees at? I don't know.
no, I mean, I think I see it like you can see the progression. It's only been a few years and you can see where these things are going now. They've progressed it's crazy. Like I use Cursor, to build out, agent blueprint. Um, I hate the term vibe coding, but it's kind of like that's sort of but I have a developer background. So a big emphasis on architecture and, you know, strategy and talking about the data, the security, all that kind of stuff. It's more like, Andrew, who, he, actually the one that coined the phrase agentic AI. He calls it like AI orchestrating or AI assisted programming or something. I like his term better, but anyway, going off base there. But um, so I think the way it's going to work in the future, and obviously, yeah, anybody trying to create the future with this stuff it's just like, you know, it's kind of it's going to be completely different than any of us think, I'm sure. But if I had to guess, these models are going to get a lot better at doing things like tool use, limiting hallucinations and things like that. And as that happens, the companies that start adopting it now and start doing it small now, getting it right now while they're not perfect, while there still is a really good use case for it. But if you start right now, by the time 2 or 3 years does come and these agents are ready to really do autonomous, you know, much, human in a loop right now is super important. At some point, it's going to become where there's agentic workflows that are going without any humans and any loops. So I just see that coming. I don't see a world that doesn't happen eventually. This stuff is it's getting better. So
Yeah, like, but right now, how do you see, just out of curiosity, like how is it that you as a company are able to lead these, so to say, agents in more almost predetermined like capabilities and paths? Because you're saying that, there's obviously a different, and maybe a lot of people are aware of how this works, but I don't think quite many people understand the guide rails that you put in place maybe as a company, or others can on those more custom built for yourself type of tools. Because there are AI agent companies right now that like Relevance and obviously like self-building stuff with NAN where you can put things in place to prevent issues. But what are you doing right now, and how does that? How do you feel like that's going to change in the next couple of years as well?
So what we're doing is, again, starting really small with with clients, like making sure they get the basics down right. Not starting off with like putting 20 agents out there and letting them run wild. Just starting small, and then the other thing is putting a human in the loop. Like really making the human like it's the agent is assisting the human. Like that's really important right now, is to have the human in the loop. Also, to have the right attitude within the organization. Like the leadership has to be, it's got to be a top down thing. If it's a business, you want your employees to adopt this stuff. It's, the adoption rates that's a big thing. You got to get people to use it so you can improve it and keep getting better. So a lot of it is organization. They call it OCM, organizational change management. It's kind of like a term used in consulting speak, but there's a lot of substance there to be had, because it's these companies aren't ready for the disruption, and they need to be ready for it, open-minded, willing to experiment, willing to, fail a little bit and try things and evaluate, reevaluate, keep tweaking, and knowing that there's no end to this. Like, it's not like you buy it off on Microsoft Office, or you buy, Salesforce or whatever, and you install it and you get a quarterly update or something. These things, it's a living application. It's like how we built Agent Blueprint. It's like the architecture of it. It's every day it's just growing. It never stops. Like, this stuff is evolving so fast. So um, there is no clear cut, like, and that's the reason why Amy and I kind of see, like, that's why we're mixing this up with our advisory services to come in and talk to our customers and help them set up like Agent Blueprint, for example, because that kind of guidance is needed, especially for companies like, I mean, you run a business. Imagine how hard, like, you and I like are in this world all the time, and how hard it is to keep up with all this stuff. Like, it's really hard. Imagine having running a business that's not related to AI at all, knowing you need to put AI in your business to stay competitive, but you just don't, you can't afford to pull in some big consulting company. You can't, but there's something you got to do. Like, and it's like, it's a first mover's advantage right now. It's like, if you can get really get your head around it in your organization, get some agents, get some of the stuff working, the automation is working. By the time it becomes like prime time, your company's going to be ready and you're going to have that advantage over your competitors.
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a bit of an inflection point with this stuff, and it's about who's like actively right now setting up the foundational capabilities, and then when the products continue to improve, they'll really see exponential like benefits in comparison to what companies who don't have. So I definitely think you're on to something there. And you hit on something interesting there. We are in this every day. A lot of companies aren't. When do you think there will be a shift towards more companies taking this into their everyday workplace? Because I think in all honesty, we haven't really moved much for most companies outside of using some tools, maybe a little bit more than just like their employees using ChatGPT or whatever. Between compliance and people just not being that technical, I don't think we've actually moved much from an adoption standpoint in your everyday company from 2023 or whatever that was, with like the fall of 23 would have been ChatGPT, maybe 22, I forget at this point. Like when it 3.5 came out, I don't think we've seen like a crazy large amount of adoption in the totality, let's say, of work, right? And that's where that study maybe is coming from, about 95%, which does feel a little bit ridiculous, but could be the case that a lot of people are just using ChatGPT to respond to emails and whatnot.
Yeah, there's a shadow AI going on with low organizations where people are bringing their own AI and kind of using that themselves, so that again comes down to leadership of really, promoting what you're doing internally. But the biggest adoption, as like, is been marketing and sales, like that's been a really big adoption. So like companies are using it as like, we're AI first, and like everybody's like AI driven. But like, I think what you're talking about was like the real adoption, like the people using it to actually automate back end processes in their business, like doing real stuff with it. And that is right now, I think, where the companies that lead with that now are going to be the ones that make the other companies change, because they're going to gain a competitive advantage, 2-3 years from now. And then those other companies will have no choice. Like, it's not going to be an option. It's either like, either either you start using a calculator, or you keep using a pencil and a paper, to do your math. Like, which one you're going to do. It's kind of like that. It's like at some point you have to adopt the technology that's out there, whether you like it or not. I know a lot of people don't like it. There's a lot of like philosophical, existential type conversations about it. People like to kind of go with that with AI. It's kind of funny, but at the end of the day, the reality is the businesses that adopted early, they're going to excel. This is my opinion anyway. The ones that don't, they're going to suffer from not having that competitive advantage that the ones that did. They're all going to adopt it. Startups, like Amy and I, like we are AI all the new businesses that are coming up now, I can't think of any new business coming up now that would not be, AI first. Like, it's amazing what you can do with AI as an entrepreneur starting a new company. It's crazy. All this stuff. Like, go on for days talking about all the tools that we use. So I think startups and early adopters are going to drive the ones that decide not to. I guess that's my opinion anyway, based on what I'm saying.
No, I think that's fair. And you're kind of in a position to help out a lot of companies. So I think you would see the writing on the wall with a lot of different industries, and that's fair enough. Like, if I were to tell somebody, let's say, I think the calculator example was a good analogy, but the interesting thing I learned in a recent episode is we often think about this from a knowledge work perspective, right? And how maybe physical companies won't benefit from this, and when I say physical, I mean like manufacturing, like physical operations companies, because they already in essence have gone through their revolution, right? Like the example that I would say most plainly would be, in the 1900s, would companies be comfortable with saying, no, we don't need mechanical assembly. We're not going to do the assembly line. That's stupid. Then after that, we're not going to do robotic assembly lines, right? That could work round clock without any technical errors and that sort of stuff. So that industry has never had an issue with it. And the companies that were late to adopt it are, behind and have just no competitive edge at all. Right. And that essentially is what kind of the market we're in is, especially with software. To be quite frank, people are not going to pick your worst app. They're not going to pick your worst automation and using it from the company standpoint. And if you are a company that is providing a service or providing a product and they're able to get quicker responses, answers to questions, quicker turnaround times on delivery, they're going to go with the quicker one. People pay for quality and speed is actually a very underrated one in those categories. And the nice thing about agents is due to their, if you guide rail them, consistency and as well as speed, because they have the ability to run nonstop and run in parallel. You get both of those things.
Yeah. Yep. And then you got the cost and everything like that come into it.
And the cost part too. Don't even need to get into that. They can be more competitive with their own costs in comparison to their competitors. If somebody does this right, they can provide a better service or product at a better cost in less time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. Especially smaller companies, like the RFP processing with the procurement team, or big companies, whenever they want to, whenever they want to do solve a new problem, they have the luxury. They got this whole procurement team that creates this like RFP, puts in the technical requirements and all that stuff, and then they post it out, and they got all these vendors fighting to, put out their solution and the best price, and because they want to win the bid, so they can be the ones that make the $2-3 million, implementation. But you've got to be a big enough company with the procuring team, and now like with what we call Source Assist, it's a ServiceNow, the agent app that we built. It's a Agentic app. It's about, I'd say 12 agents that work together to basically intake the product request. They basically take that. They comply it with policies. It's all automated, human in the loop, but these are all agents doing this stuff. And they determine, okay, what are the, this product, and let's just say it passes the test. So, okay, we're gonna release this on our portal. So companies can come in and they could submit their proposal to be our vendor of choice. Well, so it does that automatically. The agents do that. And then you got another agent, because there's always like a 2-week period or so where vendors can ask questions, and like you got to answer all their questions. So now you got an agent that's answering questions automatically, human in the loop again, still checking. And then once the questions are all answered and the vendors all submit their proposal to be the product that your company chooses, you've got like hundreds of proposals of these companies that say they're the best, and they've got the pricing, they've got like what they do and what they don't do and all this and that. Well, now you've got an agent that basically can just scan through all those things and kind of align it with your business goals, align it with your policies, and give you like top 10 vendors out of 100. And then you got a human that comes in and basically takes those top 10, finds a finalist, and kind of does it. So now instead of having a whole procurement team all doing all that, you've got one person in your company that can leverage all these agents. So it's like an augmented, resource. And I think that's going to be the future, where you've got, people that are able to do things that, much more meaningful. Because think about that toil. Like someone's got to answer all those emails coming in from vendors. Like no one wants to do that. Someone's got to put together a document that like talks about like what the requirements are, and like an Excel sheet with all these requirements. That there's all this stuff that you got to do. Like as a pre-sales person, when we responded as ServiceNow to these RFPs, I had to fill these things out. I hated it. Now AI can do it all. Like, oh man, I wish I had AI back then. But yeah, so I think it's going to give an advantage to a lot of companies that are smaller, like in mid-market, small businesses. They're going to be able to compete a lot easier because they can do a lot more with a lot less people. So I think that's.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I that kind of leads to a natural question. How do you think this is going to impact the job marketplace moving forward? Right, you just gave an example of how one person can do a litany of different mundane tasks, essentially, right? At scale. Where do you think this is going to impact the job market moving forward?
Yeah, that's like one of the tougher questions to answer, right? It's like kind of sensitive. And, like I know when I was at Stripe, they went through the layoff. They lay off like 10% of the people. I remember waking up, seeing that email. Like I wasn't one of them, but like, it's people losing their jobs. It sucks. It sucks for their family and everything. But like your job is the job is a thing that you do that's providing value. And the second your job doesn't have an ROI on it, then like it's a business. Suddenly, it's like, and it might tell you that your family and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, you're an asset to a business. And if the business no longer sees you as an asset, they're going to cut the costs. That's how they stay afloat. That's how they make their money, right? So if the job market, I think the biggest impact is people that don't, people that resist the stuff, AI, like, especially if you're doing work that's like knowledge work, programming, programmers that are, if you're just a JavaScript developer or something like that, or you're just, you're doing data gathering and filling things out, those jobs are going to be, that specific job, that task is going to be done by AI. Like with, like, I mean, I don't know when it's already happening now, but imagine 2 years from now, it's going to be, commoditized knowledge work and that kind of thing. But with that being said, I think that's, if you embrace it and you start learning this stuff now, I think there's going to be new jobs that are open for, because when you progress, like people keep getting better at stuff and keep innovating and keep coming up with new things depending on the thing that we have at our disposal. So this stuff's going to create like a lot of unknowns that we don't know now, a lot of, I think, job opportunities. I just think jobs are going to change. The nature of jobs are going to change. Like it's going to be a lot less busy work, knowledge work, that kind of thing. And it's going to be a lot more people doing a lot more meaningful work. But the job market, I think, while we find our way, it's going to take a hit because it's going to be, people are expensive and they're,
There's an adjustment period for sure.
yeah, it's going to be an adjustment period. I think there's going to be a gap where companies really start adopting this stuff. Jobs that were knowledge work and task oriented are going to go away. And if those people didn't, if they didn't take the, chance right now, while you see it coming, it's like, go to your business and be like, what are your business initiatives? Like, what are our highest strategic executive KPIs, and try to align yourself with those, like, see where you can, fit in that and make the business money, be valuable, try to find out, like, so if your task now is about to be automated, where can you provide value? If you love the job you have and you love the company you work for, but also it's going to create a lot of entrepreneurs too, like these people that lose their jobs, you got experience, you've got abilities, and now you can, 1, 2, 3 people can do a lot of stuff together. If you put your minds to it and leverage this AI stuff, like you can scale really fast as a entrepreneur. I know that's not everybody's, cup of tea or anything, but it definitely opens, I think, a lot of opportunity for that. So like, yeah, traditional jobs, I think their days are numbered, but I think there's going to be a new sort of way jobs are structured and done organizationally, everything. And I'm just most excited about the entrepreneur, sort of like people having the opportunity to actually go out and do their own thing and take a risk and start a business and provide value that way. So that's how I see it. A little optimism, a little, I try to be realistic with this stuff. It's I don't like the doomer take or the accelerationist take. Just try to take a kind of a real take on it. But.
Yeah, fair enough. I do think it'll lead to a lot of entrepreneurs as well. It's kind of a hard position to be in. As a business owner, I know what it's like when, it's very hard, on a business owner to do it. It's very hard on a business owner to think to cut somebody from what they do for a living. And the emotions are so hard to navigate through as a small business owner and as an employee. So it's going to be an interesting thing. I just like to hear everyone's take on where it's going to go. Cause it is a bit of an interesting, murky landscape that I don't think any of us can quite predict 100%. I think most people are in the perspective of thinking that there's going to be some tumultuous times and some layoffs and stuff like that. And then I'm hearing more of a positive vibe from a couple guests, including yourself, that work will become more meaningful, which is a good way to spin it. Because most people have originally talked about the efficiency and about how there's going to be more work done, and others have like, well, there might be less work done, but it's actually better work done and it's more fulfilling work. So I think that's a positive as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. But yeah, a lot of things it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, but I think it's going to get better. I think
Yeah, might do one of these for the job market. Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you for being on the show. I just want to ask you, as we close things out, if there's any other thoughts you had on everything, and last but not least, to plug your stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, and you made it this far. I appreciate your podcast. I get a lot. There's no books out there on this stuff. If there are, it's probably outdated, and if it's not outdated, it's probably written by AI. So these kind of podcasts are really where, where you got people that come on and just kind of talk about the real, things they're going through. So I really appreciate that. And if people haven't already, you've got a lot of great guests on that you've had that really talk about just the day to day that they're going through with this stuff. So, so a plug for you, first of all. For us, Amy and I, like we, again, she's my co-founder, Amy Glencross. She's awesome to work with. That's such an important thing, to find a good co-founder that you can work with, yeah, both of us are always wanting to talk about this stuff. No matter who you are, like you go to agentblueprint.ai and you can, we got like a form on there. If you want to become a design partner with us, we'd love to work with you. Or I'm Chris at agentblueprint.ai. You can just, email me directly. And like I said, we've also got our Nalgentic, which is where we focus more on like advisory, fixed fee type services for customers that want to take the journey from AI. Mostly with ServiceNow on that one. Agent Blueprint's what it would be. So I'd love to work with you on it. And yeah, I appreciate you listening to us.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, please make sure to go check out what they're doing at Agent Blueprint. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the AI Agents Podcast. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already, Spotify, all the different platforms for your listening pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to this one, and we'll see you in the next one.